Welcome to the Fun Astrology and Merriman Market Analyst Saturday Financial Podcast. I'm Thomas Miller. Thank you for joining us. This is the free weekly newsletter. It's published every weekend at MMACycles.com by financial analyst and astrologer Ray Merriman, who is writing this week's column, by the way. And we get started with a relevant end-of-the-week article from the Wall Street Journal. U.S. job growth continued to slow down in August, a sign that the labor market is deteriorating markedly. The government also revised its numbers from earlier in the summer and said that the economy lost a net 13,000 jobs in June. It was the first such decline since December 2020. The U.S. added 22,000 jobs in August, the Labor Department reported Friday, below the gain of 75,000 jobs economists polled by the Wall Street Journal had expected, end quote. And another story from Fox Business on Thursday. Mortgage rates fell to the lowest level since October 2024. Freddie Mac's latest primary mortgage market survey released Thursday showed the average rate on the benchmark 30-year mortgage fell to 6.5% from last week's reading of 6.56%. Now, Ray's comments for the week past before we look ahead to the week of September 8th. He says it was an interesting week for global financial markets as we come to the end of the current TUMDI period. That stands for the Trump-Uranus Market Disruption Indicator. The current period started August 22nd and it ends on Monday, September 8th. TUMDI highlights strong disruptive Uranus signatures, which we observe often correlates to surprising and unexpected remarks by President Trump that are followed by sharp price movements in financial markets. Or maybe the market turns were going to happen anyway, regardless of the president's words and acts. Maybe there's no correlation. We'll just have to wait and see. The observations have only been in effect since he took office 8 months ago. The current slew of Uranus signatures were most notable August 22nd to 25th, and now again from September 5th through the 8th, Friday through Monday. During this time, many global stock indices made new all-time or multi-year highs in the August 22nd to 25th time band, and then declined briefly but somewhat sharply into early last week before beginning another rally to challenge or make a new round of highs by Friday. But following U.S. unemployment numbers, which were released Friday morning, U.S. stocks once again started a sudden retreat southward. Twists and turns were also observable in Bitcoin and Ethereum. Both fell hard to lows on August 29th through September 2nd, following their all-time highs of August 14th in Bitcoin and 24th in Ethereum. However, the most exciting moves during this TUMDI time band transpired with gold and silver. On Friday, gold exploded to another new all-time high with the spot market testing 3,600. While silver soared above $42 on the December contract for the first time in 14 years and is probably headed for a new all-time high shortly itself. And that was the summation of market activity this week. Now a turn to the short-term geocosmics and longer-term thoughts. And an article from this weekend's Wall Street Journal from Peggy Noonan, a quote from author David McCullough. He asks, "Why does history matter?" History shows us how to behave. History teaches, reinforces what we believe in, what we stand for, and what we ought to be willing to stand up for. It's not only the dry recording of facts, it has a moral quotient. Indifference to history isn't just ignorant, it's rude. Bluntly put, ignorance is a form of ingratitude. End quote. Ray's thoughts now for the geocosmics ahead. The short-term TUMDI period ends this weekend as Uranus turns retrograde at 1 degree Gemini. It follows the Sun-Uranus square of August 24th, which was further highlighted by Jupiter at the midpoint of both the Sun and Uranus, forming a double semi-square. It was a volatile period for many markets, but it was unusual in the case of global stock markets, which were bullish at both the start and the end of the Uranus-highlighted times. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, for instance, made a new all-time high on August 22nd, followed by a modest decline into a major cycle low on September 2nd. On Friday, both the Dow Jones Industrial Average and S&P made another new all-time high, but not the Nasdaq, only to suddenly reverse downwards again. Typical Uranus behavior, much like Mercury retrograde, the trickster. And perhaps this is not surprising, given that Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury. With Uranus, you usually either get breakouts to new highs or lows, or sudden reversals of trend. In this case, stocks appear to have rallied to new highs in each instance. The new highs suggest a breakout, but in each case, the breakout is quickly followed by a pullback, so it ends up being more of a reversal, albeit only short-term until now. Will this Uranus zone be more of a reversal for the U.S. stock market? If so, it could be a multi-week decline. A break below last week's low would suggest it is, and this would fit the true reversal character of Uranus. Market reversals are possible not only because powerful Uranus is changing directions, but also because there is a very tight orb lunar eclipse on Sunday in mutable signs. Disruptive events or announcements could still strike financial markets by Monday. It wouldn't be surprising to astrologers, but the specific nature of the event or announcement would not be easily known. For instance, Uranus periods are vulnerable to natural calamities like earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, and electrical blackouts. They can also coincide with terrorist acts. These types of events may be highlighted by the intense lunar eclipse unfolding in changeable mutable signs on Sunday and Monday. The next critical geocosmic reversal is not that far away. It takes place with the new moon of September 21st, which is also an eclipse, but a rather wide solar eclipse in this case. But that is not what makes this period so important from a cosmic perspective. There are two other factors that stand out. The first is that Mars will enter Scorpio one day later on September 22nd. The other is that the new moon/eclipse takes place within 1 degree of the autumnal equinox at 29 degrees 5 minutes Virgo, in opposition to the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Mars in Scorpio has a high correlation to bullish trends in commodity markets, especially gold, which we will discuss in our September 14th micro-webinar, which the details are in the announcements part of the newsletter at MMACycles.com. The 36-year conjunction of Saturn and Neptune is a long-term planetary pair cycle, which has particular importance from spring 2025 through February 2026, because it takes place on the vernal equinox point of 0 degrees Aries. Furthermore, the long-term Uranus-Pluto trine is also taking place, and its midpoint also activates 0 degrees Aries. This creates a funnel in the solar system, or a vortex, with the Earth at the apex. Hence, this is the basis for the extraordinary celestial configuration we will call the Aries Vortex. The last time Saturn and Neptune conjoined in early Aries was over 3,000 years ago, and it probably did not involve the midpoint of Uranus and Pluto. A configuration this rare involving all 4 of the outermost planets is a harbinger of a radical change in the arc of civilization, which the world is visibly undergoing now. Hence, Peggy Noonan writes in her weekly column for the Wall Street Journal that this is a time in which it is worth knowing history. Knowledge and appreciation of history cannot and should not be ignored, except by those who may be ignorant and/or ungrateful. This is also why astrology is so valuable to society, because students and researchers of this study can observe these rare cosmic configurations and look back on history and see what types of events, transformations, and new eras unfolded in the human experience. Similar themes and even events repeat under similar cosmic patterns. Astrology is one of the finest studies involving pattern matching, and history provides the data for that research. The Aries Vortex is already manifesting as a challenging and difficult period, for it represents a vastly new and different path for humanity. It's not easy to adjust to this magnitude of a new world order, but it is necessary, and it helps when one understands that these very rare cosmic periods also represent outstanding opportunities, particularly to those who can adjust quickly, as associated by Uranus in Gemini. Yes, Saturn in Aries coincides with coercion and bullying, as written in last week's column, but that's only one of several expressions possible under this combination. Another is to recognize that at any time, Mars and Saturn, or the signs they rule, interact with one another, like Saturn in Aries, where Aries is the ruling sign of Mars. It is a time of building new structures, systems, rules, laws, and guidelines by which we interact with one another. Building new structures and systems is what Saturn does so well. But this activity works best, potentially achieves greatness, when all are on board, and not when it is demanded or forced onto the collective by one or just a few. When that happens, there is much resistance, Saturn against force, Aries. But when it's a team, or a we effort instead of a me effort, great things can be built that will last for a very long time. This could be a time likened to the period in which the Great Pyramids were built. That type of Herculean effort is a classic example of the constructive principles of Saturn and Aries working towards manifesting an enduring mutual goal with a view to a far distant future. Our world leaders might try for something like that. And that completes this week's newsletter. I would only say that if enough of us got together and visualized that, then maybe the world leaders would actually do something like that. Thanks so much for listening. Hope you have a great rest of the weekend. I'll be back on Fun Astrology Monday with and then a weekly overview on the YouTube channel this weekend. We got a lot going on next week as well, so we will see you on the podcasts. Have a great weekend.